Hello and welcome to my FSMET 2024 event. All things considered. Social secure by fair and smart, giving, trading, taking, keeping. The whole thing. To whom, how much, who wants how much, which shares are fair, produce and destroy, give away, swap, take, defend, conquer what already exists, shares, fair enough versus as much as possible, and fair distributed in between. Who decides legitimately? Each individual, a subgroup, all together. How do you decide legitimately? By majority or by consensus, weighted according to knowledge or money? Or how are natural or historical advantages taken into account? To produce, you need capital, labor, and land, i.e., raw materials and production sites. Do you strive for enough for everyone or just for yourself and those who are important to you or who you need? And do you take into account that you need to be able to keep those whose wishes you do not sufficiently fulfill under control? Roughly speaking, it's all about increasing, decreasing the total stock and about distribution. Do you want more through more total stock and a share of it? Or do you want more by appropriating shares in the existing stock from others? Or at what point in the latter is the latter reprehensible, and up to what point it is reasonable or and sustainable? To what is fair necessary and to what is fair unlimited? And what do we mean by social? The pursuit of fairness for justice, and how do you go about it? With universal moral self-demand, UMSD, do enough people know what cultural hegemony projects are, and that the third party usually benefits when two people argue, and that freedom can also mean freedom from future. This is possible the abstract framework around the questions: what is it like now? How should it be? How do you get there, stay there? What is it currently like? What is the current inventory? Who owns what? One share change. Who could redistribute through power if they wanted to? Who wants change and why? Who doesn't and why? Change of stock. What about the production possibilities and the will to produce? And who wants what produced, changed, destroyed? What is the distribution of purchasing power? Who owns the means of production? Who owns the raw materials? Who owns the production sites? What about the willingness to work? What do people want to work for? Who has what incentives to work? If you take all this into account, what change in stock can be expected and who is affected by this change, i.e., who has more or less due to this overall change in quantity? Second, how should it be? What total stock do you actually want? How and what distribution? How do you go about determining how it should be with universal moral self-demand, enough for everyone, as a goal and or only benefits for oneself? And do you plan for the long term, or do you believe that things will somehow work out automatically? Do you have your emotions under control, or do you just let yourself go? Third, how do you get there? Stay there. Who actually wants what and how? What opportunities are there? What opportunities and risks? So my focus is on fair, sustainable enough for all. That includes me, of course. And I prioritize my sustainable enough in my personal actions in a fair, ideally fair enough way. Fair, sustainable enough means not just making sure that is enough at the moment, but also in the future. And that you prioritize fairly and significantly. Enough is not the same as fair. You don't necessarily need a fair amount to live well or to live at all. But definitely enough. And that not only applies to the here and now. You should make sure that you act in such a way that you still have fair enough in the future. Nobody can guarantee sustainable fair enough through the age factor alone. You need others for that. At least through the age factor, because you get older, you need others. At least until everything is sufficiently automated. And needing others make you depend, especially if you need their future labor. Existing things can be appreciated if you are powerful enough. Well, that doesn't get any easier with age. Smile. But work has to be done. And all the work that has not yet been automated and for which uh, animals cannot be used depends on people. And they have to want to do it. It becomes problematic when they don't want to. Then there are the famous carrot and or stick options. So if you want to be prepared for all eventualities and not just hope for the eventuality that a significant number of people always want to, you have to come to terms with these two options. Or you think it's generally unfair to try to get people to work if they don't want to. You can see it that way, but it doesn't correspond to my current morality with universal moral self-demand. Then there's the question of how far you want to go to get people to work. Mind you, what we are talking about work for the necessary. The current government in Germany, hopefully only because of the pressure from a large extent from the opposition, is sanction refusals of tolerable work and sanctioned for only for tolerable work in general, and not just for working for the sustainable fair enough, not even just for the fair share, uh, just yeah. But without distinction for every reasonable demand. It's all about avoiding democratic redistribution as much as possible anyway. It is probably financed by Stand Together and Koch. Yeah, that's a little uh, funny word. But nevertheless, necessary work must also be done. That's why sustainable fairness also means having enough exchange mass to be able to offer something to those who are not directly willing. Of course, they had to lack that beforehand. So fair equal must take into account the ability and willingness to work. The web options should at least be kept in mind in terms of fairness. And fair enough. But and fair means fair distribution of labor. This should not only affect those who don't have a job, who for whatever reason, but also those who work something that is not needed for sustainable significance. You then have to persuade them to change. But that's not what the German employers are thinking about. They prefer to target small groups that are socially worse off than the majority and need support. Or they don't want need support, but yes, don't want to. State distribution phobia à la Stanford. It shouldn't be like that. Work must be distributed fairly. And above all, it must be prioritized fairly enough. So you also have to be able and willing to delegate people who have one job to another when it needs to be done. Yeah, they should change. That's right. And sufficiently fair balance of risks is also important. But perhaps this is not really a majority option. But fair, sustainable enough must also be a limit for the freedom of the majority at some point. It would be better to sacrifice democracy in the sense of pure majority voting, ochlocracy from my unser UMCA perspective, than fair, sustainable enough for. So labor is producing for sustainable, fair enough is not necessarily a surefire success. Neither is capital for sustainable, fair enough, or land, or as a raw material, or location, which brings us back to German's external contribution. In other words, what the outside world pays us due to the lack of internal distribution. This is already very limited and very voluntary for keeping our borders open and not conquering our locations. The question is whether it's sensible to make others pay for something that you already need for your sustainable sufficiency, especially when parts of the outside slowly get the majority inside. Before this happens, should we continue to be unfair and threatens people's livelihoods more coronavirus deaths in Italy, for example, via the external contribution? This is unfair. That is unfair. That this is unfair is obvious from the situation between rich and poor and the sheer size of our country. Unfair at the point of certain loss of power. Again, the farce of the Prussian attempts to conquer Germany in the First World War and the racist accounts of extermination and conquer in the Second World War. So we didn't limit the conquest to what was fairly necessary, even if Delbrück and co. might have wanted that in World War One, but it would hardly have been possible to stop our own rights after a complete defeat of the outside. And since 2002, we have abused the swap for a more than fair share hunt with an unfair location advantage. Albeit, perhaps unintentionally, but since 2000, 17 uh, grossly negligently and gift giving in a key issue is Ukraine Russia war, but not allowing Russia to secure its military harbor by not allowing Russia to secure its military harbor, land bridge, and there and fair land for those who want to travel from Ukraine 91 to Russia. Even military is necessary. We have also mentioned we have also messed things up with when it comes to donations. However, without these donations, we could and should provide much more military support to the core of Ukraine. So we, as Germany and also the EU and NATO, should focus on our fair and sustainable sufficiency and also that of others. And under no circumstances should we retain more than a fair share, neither by conquering, defeating, nor by bartering, nor by giving. So yeah, thanks for your attention. Thomas Hinkelmann, rkslp.org. That's all.